Alright, welcome back to yet another Guide Friday. Today we're going to be covering the fresh off the press, newly added Tis But a Scratch mod to Roguetech. So, the short version is, this is a mod that changes it from just generic injuries and once you reach 0 health you get incapacitated, to being much more intense. So your mech warriors have their head, left and right arm, torso, and left and right leg that can be injured with specific injuries that we'll get to in a moment. This is just going to go over first how it works, or what the idea is. So whenever they're injured, the mech warrior can suffer a list of different injuries that will A, take time to heal, and B, give them penalties based on the injury they've sustained. So if it is not a debilitating injury, you will still be able to drop the mech warrior into a battle, but they will have penalties for any injuries that have not fully healed. Whenever a pilot becomes debilitated, they can no longer drop on contracts. The debilitation thing is a little bit confusing for me, partially because depending on how they implemented it in Roguetech, it changes how severe it is. But basically, there's a chance that your mech warriors can be seriously injured to the point where they may not be able to recover. Unless, again, while it was implemented in Roguetech, the chance of permanent disability is negated or not used, because it is optional in this mod that's been added to Roguetech. So the tooltip, whenever you hover over a mech warrior, will tell you if they're debilitated, if they're almost debilitated, how severe their injuries are, and what their injuries penalties are. And a pilot, if they are injured too many times, will basically black out from the pain, and the mech will fall, but the pilot will just be incapacitated, not killed. Bleeding out has been added, so once a bleeding injury is inflicted, the mech warrior will continue bleeding every turn that they take until either you complete the mission, eject the mech warrior, or they die from blood loss. So this makes pilot injuries much more of a concern while you're playing Roguetech. So if your mech warrior starts bleeding out, you're going to need to eject them if you can't finish the mission in time. Or, if I'm understanding the way this works correctly, you can choose to just let them die to prevent yourself from having to eject. And if I understand the way this works correctly, you can save your head components but lose the mech warrior, or save your mech warrior but lose your head components. So that is very interesting that they added that. So as your mech warriors bleed out, they actually get more and more penalties until they're just about dead. And the longer they were bleeding out, the longer the time it takes for them to recover. And you'll be able to see in the mission what's going on exactly. How many rounds are left and everything. Here it gets into a little bit of the coding. Again, this is stuff that's toggled on or off based on what you wanted to do with the mod, but now that it's been added to Roguetech, I haven't looked yet to see what the default settings are for Roguetech. But there's various things like a pilot tag called Pain Shunt, where they ignore injuries from overheating, component ammo explosion, or neural feedback from DNI and enhanced imaging cockpits, which, by the way, is a new thing. If you're using a DNI or enhanced imaging cockpit, where your mech warrior is literally integrated psychologically with the mech, you take injuries when your mech is taking structure damage, instead of just when you overheat. The taking injuries on overheat has been removed to more closely mimic the tabletop experience. So if you're integrated mentally with the mech, and your mech gets an arm blown off, you're going to get an arm injury. So since this entire system increases the time it takes for injuries to heal, they have reduced the amount of fatigue generated from dropping on missions if you aren't injured, to kind of offset and balance that. This is talking about how the vanilla healing time works, and how basically they kept it where a health 3 pilot heals slower than a health 4 pilot. So if you have a mech warrior that has 5 health due to, for example, military and athletic, then they're going to heal faster than a mech warrior that only has 3 health. This is just example stuff. We'll get to specifics in a moment. So there are different injuries for overheating, for thermal injuries and things like that, and you can receive burns while you're overheating. If your mech's running too hot, your mech warrior can be burned inside the cockpit, literally baking inside of their own cockpit. And based on the severity, the injuries will do various things. The biggest thing to absolutely keep in mind is if your mech warrior starts bleeding out, they will die. Now, it depends, I'm sure, on the settings you set Roguetech to, but if you're playing normal or lethal, they will die. If you're playing, I forget what the option you can set is where you don't lose pilots. I'm pretty sure they won't die from bleeding out if you have that setting enabled, but the mech will still drop for the mission. See, there's more specifics. You are more likely to be injured in the same location if you're already injured in that location. The severity of your injury will increase, and there's a system built. They've built in the consideration for whether or not you have a torso-mounted cockpit. So now having a head-mounted cockpit will receive injuries in one way, and having a torso-mounted cockpit, you'll still be able to receive pilot injuries, just not from head hits. There is no longer the benefit from having a torso-mounted cockpit of not getting pilot injuries. You're going to still get pilot injuries, just in a different way. The life support, if they get crit, the pilot takes injuries. But there's also a blood bank stat that, based on the settings, are going to determine how long your mech warriors take to bleed out. So here's where it says, you have different bleeding effects, so different penalties that will increase as you continue bleeding out. So in this example, if you have a blood bank of 8, a max blood bank of 8, and your blood bank is down to 6, any effect that is set at an 80% threshold will be applied. In any case, as the injuries increase, as the variety of injuries your mech warrior takes increase, you could end up with a ton of different penalties. I don't remember where it shows in here, but if you have, even if they're not like debilitating because you have 4 injuries to your arm, you can still have so many injuries that just altogether they render you useless until they heal. So if you want to read more on exactly how it goes and look at the files, the link up here, the site that I'm looking at, the GitHub repository that I'm looking at for all this information, will be in the description, so go ahead and check that out. Now then, straight out of the Roguetech cache, we have this. So, yeah, as I figured, bleeding out lethal is true. So, if you let your mech warrior bleed out, they will die. Unless there's something in here that would change based on a setting. I don't know. I don't know exactly how the Roguetech settings interact with the Roguetech cache. So, I always play with lethal enabled, so this is perfectly fine for me. I forget what the setting is where you don't lose mech warriors from injuries, but I'm sure that in some way interacts with this mod. Or maybe not. Maybe they just completely negated that option. In any case, enable internal damage injuries. This means your mech warrior can take injuries just from having structure damage. The internal damage injury limit, meaning the minimum damage you can take and possibly receive an injury, is 1. So that means even a machine gun round can cause an injury. I don't know what internal damage level required means, but time heals all wounds. So according to this, if I'm understanding the way the mod works correctly, in Roguetech you do not have to worry about having a permanently debilitated mech warrior. They will eventually be able to drop again. It's just how long. Re-injure weight applies current contract is false, which I believe means you're not more likely to receive injuries to the same location in the same mission, but if you drop them on another mission with the injuries still active, then the chance to have that location injured again is higher. Severity cost, debilitate cost, that has something to do with medtechs. Medtech to bill multiplier is 0.5, don't know what that means. Injury heal time multiplier is 1, don't know what that means. So I think this particular entry is to differentiate between vehicles and mechs. Then, yeah, here's the torso mount, internal damage location, heads and torso, blah, blah. Okay, here we go. Injury effects list. So, first up, we have a concussion. In order to get a concussion, you have to have you get a head injury. So, whenever your mech warrior is injured and it rolls to see where they're injured and they get injured in the head, they can get a concussion. That's how this entire list is going to be. The injury location is just what location has to be rolled for this injury to be possible. The description, this pilot is concussed, things are spinny. And the statistic data is their unsteady threshold is multiplied by 0.75. So basically they lose 25% of their unsteady threshold. Then another head injury is broken jaw. This pilot has a broken jaw and generates less resolve due to hampered communications. So, the buff? I don't know why it says buff. But the statistic data is morale bonus gain is -3. I don't know if that's just if you're not generating any morale, it's 0. If they have it at -3 for that reason, or if you're actually losing morale each turn because the pilot can't communicate properly. That I'll have to see. I'm not sure on that one. Then we have head burns, which is another head injury. This pilot has severe burns to the head. Sight distance is impaired. So the sight distance is reduced by 25%. Barotrauma, head. This pilot has suffered barotrauma to the head. Unsteady threshold decreased. So unsteady threshold is just flat out reduced by 50. So I'm pretty sure that means you don't have an unsteady threshold anymore. Because I think even with the enhanced gyros, -50 is going to set you at 0. So basically you get knocked unsteady anytime you get hit by anything if you have this injury. Severe burns left arm. Severely burned, accuracy penalty. So looks like they get a penalty of 2. So essentially anyone they're shooting at effectively has 1 higher evasion. That's penalty 2. So severe burns right arm, same thing. Penalty of 2 to accuracy. Simple fracture. This pilot has a broken arm and is suffering an accuracy penalty. This is an accuracy penalty of 3. Then we have so right arm, same thing. This pilot has a compound fracture in their arm and is suffering an accuracy penalty of 4. This pilot has a compound fracture in their arm and is suffering an accuracy penalty 4. So compound fracture is a penalty of 4. Severe burns left leg is the walk speed is reduced by 25%. And jump distance, it looks like, is also reduced by 25%. And then same for the right leg. Broken leg. So broken leg is a 25% penalty to walk speed and a 25% penalty to jump distance. Okay? And then this is the left leg. Okay, broken leg and suffering 25%, 25%. Compound fracture, 50% walk speed reduction and a 50% jump distance reduction. That is a lot. This pilot is suffering from internal bleeding and receives a debuff to evasion. So if you have internal bleeding of your torso, you have a -3 to evasion. Oh, wait, max evasion. Okay. So if I'm understanding this correctly, your max evasion drops by 3. So if you are just if you're a normal mech warrior, that means your max evasion would become 3. And if you are a reckless mech warrior, your max evasion would become 2. If you have internal torso bleeding. Pilot has broken ribs. Broken ribs is a -2 to evasion pips. To max evasion pips. Pilot has a punctured lung. Has a penalty to guts. -3 penalty to guts. This pilot has a collapsed lung and has a penalty to guts. So that's -5 guts. This pilot has been severely burned and receives a debuff to evasion. Is a -3 to max evasion, it looks like. And then we have head neural feedback. This pilot has suffered from neural feedback from a DNI or enhanced imaging interface and has drastically reduced accuracy. So a penalty of 5 to hit. And then we have this pilot has suffered minor blood loss and has reduced accuracy because, yeah, the shock of blood loss. So this is the point where the bleeding factor is 70.75. So whenever they're at or below 75% of their blood bank, then they're going to have a penalty of 1 to accuracy. And if I'm understanding this correctly, that will also apply to this. So you would also have... Wait. Okay. Is there another point where... Okay, so... This confuses me a little. Bleeding effect level 1. Additive bleeding factor. So... Bleeding effect level 2. So, I'm not sure exactly the numbers. I think this would be 75%. So that would be a 25% per bleed effect level, maybe? But in any case, as your pilot gets closer and closer to bleeding out, they start off with a penalty of 1 to accuracy. Then their unsteady threshold gets reduced by 15%. Then their walk speed gets reduced by 25%. And their jump distance also gets reduced by 25%. And bleed guts level 1. Don't know what that means exactly. But that's effect level 1. So I guess that would be a -1 to guts when you're at level 1. When you're at level 2 severity for bleeding, then you lose 3 guts. And if you get to bleeding effect level 3, which is the most severe, then apparently you lose -5 to guts. And I don't know if that's cumulative. I don't know if it's -1 in addition to -3 in addition to -5. But it might just be, one replaces the next. Not entirely sure on that one. I'm fairly certain that the bleeding effects up here are cumulative, so you still have the 1 penalty to accuracy as you lose the unsteady threshold, and then continue having the unsteady threshold penalty and accuracy penalty when you get to the walk and jump penalty. So I imagine this would work the same way. So you'd be -1 and then total of -4 and then total of -9. So bleeding out is bad. The longer you stay in the cockpit after you start bleeding out, the worse you're going to be and the longer it's going to take to heal. Yeah, apparently the author is T-Bone, so shout out to him. And whoever Jamie Wolf is apparently was inspiration and assistance. So, cool. Shout out to them. Okay, and finally we have an event that's been added for if you have a debilitated mech warrior. So, somebody's rehabilitation is coming along, but with the advanced facilities aboard the Argo, we can certainly speed things up if we want to pay the price. The newer prosthetics have almost no acclimatization time, but will need a hefty chunk of change to get those pukes at whoever to send us the specs for replacement limb. What do you think? Acclimatization? Whatever. So your options are refuse. Sorry, Doc, we just can't spare the cash for it right now. Carry on with your normal rehabilitation. And by doing so, you lose morale. You get low morale for whatever mech warrior is, I assume, for the debilitated mech warrior. So that's a month of low morale, but if they're debilitated, you can't drop them in missions anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. Does not look like there's anything there. And then you could buy the replacement. So this company is family. Whatever we need to do to keep us going, we'll do it. Transfer the payment immediately. And then whoever is no longer debilitated and may be deployed. So removes the tag debilitated. And yeah, you pay 1 million C-bills for it. All right then. So that's the new event that comes up whenever you have a debilitated mech warrior. And I believe that covers the new Tis But a Scratch addition to the Roguetech mod. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. And if I don't know the answer, I will jump over to the Roguetech Discord, which I also will have in the description in case you want to ask yourself. So that's been your guide for today. I hope you learned something interesting. And until next time, have a good one.